Welcome to the Scandinavian Mind podcast, our weekly show about how technology is changing the creative industries. Today on the program, how AI will change work and creativity. This week, GPT-4 was released, the latest release of OpenAI's language model. It's got everyone talking, and we'll break down what it means for the future of work and creativity. Also, we are joined later by our special guest, Julia Krantz, creative director in the 3D space and founder of the website Magic Fabric, which covers digital fashion, AI art, and more. She also released her own chatbot this week, which we'll talk about. I'm Konrad Olsson, editor-in-chief and founder of Scandinavian Mind, and I'm here with my dear colleagues Erik, Sedin, and Roland, Philippe, Kretzschmar. How are you guys?
Great, good to be back on the show.
Yeah, great to be back.
Great to have the AI podcast back. It feels like we can't get enough of this subject, and neither can the rest of the world. There's so much happening this year around generative AI, as it's called. So just a few months after the release of ChatGPT, the search box / chat tool, whatever that was powered by GPT-3, that was the engine. OpenAI has now released GPT-4. So many people who are in the kind of tech space have heard about this the last few days. There's been examples of what this engine can do. It can not only handle text, it can also parse both, images and text. It can analyze contents in images. It can create websites based on just hand-drawn sketches. It can process way more text, and it can perform much more better at bar exams and more. I think this is a great topical subject. So, and kind of like a follow-up to what we've been discussing in previous episodes. But Roland, I'm going to start with you. What has been your reaction to the news coming out this last few days?
So three takes on it.
Let's get into it.
Let's start with the philosophical take. So Ray Kurzweil, he's a famous forecaster, trend expert, guru. He predicted a couple of years ago that in 2045, humanity becomes immortal, that we have merged with technology in the way that basically we can upload our brains to the cloud, and in that way kind of become immortal. This kind of resurfaced in the past couple of weeks. We are on the way. We're on the way towards immortality, which is pretty interesting because if you think about it, it started with the use of the smartphone. It's an extension of our brains and how we live. It's hard to kind of be active in society today without a smartphone. Now with generative AI services, I mean, it's virtually going to be impossible to have any function in society without really using those kind of technologies. If we talk about being active, let's say in the service area, of course, if you're an artist or if you're repairing cars, you might not need it in the same way as if you are a white collar worker. So that's number one.
You really think so? You think this is where we're heading now? This yes. is the shift that's happening for white collar work. Yeah. Okay.
100%. I mean, we went over the tipping point of no return. So obviously that is thrilling, exciting, but also a bit daunting because if I look at myself, I actually don't feel I really have the time to invest in getting to learn how to put in the prompts in the right way, because it is really about prompts, right? So still those generative AI tools cannot read my mind. So I still have to kind of translate my thoughts and ideas and creativity into prompts that then will generate some kind of output, right? Anyways, two-sided sword there, right? The second thing is Microsoft announced yesterday that they are introducing AI Copilot for all the 400 million paid users of Microsoft 365. So again, that is going to be a huge impact on workforce globally. You can basically get the tool to prepare for meetings. generate new documents based on existing documents. You can create PowerPoints just based on prompts. You have embedded analytics, automatically capture meeting data, etc. I mean, there's a long
This,
list.
I'm sorry, but this blows my mind. I knew
Yeah.
I know you've done more research than me. This kind of flickered on the edge of my eye, but for this to be a reality right now, I think we should talk a little bit about how we use these services, because I've used them a little bit. I know you, Erik, use them, but the way these are implemented right now is actually a major shift. Have you guys? Let's pause right there. We can go back to what you've observed, Roland. But have you guys started using these tools in a day-to-day basis? Erik, how about you?
I think it's interesting how you said there, Roland, in 2045, and humanity will become immortal. I like to think about right now what I can see ChatGPT and AI can do for me right now. And like you said, Konrad, for anyone who doesn't know, we've said it in the podcast before. We're working on an issue 4 for a printed issue of our magazine, and I've turned to ChatGPT to kind of help me with. Writing, because that's the hardest part, I think, of writing these issues is when I write a whole story, 5 A4 pages, and then I have to make a title of 2 words, like one tongue-in-cheek kind of title. That's the hardest part. So I asked ChatGPT, I gave it like, write a nice tongue-in-cheek, fun, very short title about this
Are
text.
you leaking our text online to ChatGPT before we launch the issue?
Yeah, no,
What
I
is
didn't.
this?
I didn't give him the whole text. I just gave them what the text was about. So, like you said, Roland, maybe it's my bad prompting, or it's because ChatGPT just isn't very good. Because I thought it was terrible at doing, the Scandinavian Mind type of title.
Yeah.
It was very bad at it. Could be that I didn't give it the whole text and I didn't use the right prompts. I've been trying to give, like, for this, I'm writing one of the cover stories, and I've been trying to get, like, what should I call this story in 2 words? And I think ChatGPT has been pretty bad at it, to be honest. What I think is interesting is when we look at ChatGPT-4, is the image to text thing that you talked about. You mentioned it briefly. Imagine if for me, that would be cool. If I write this story and it's a very visual story, I'm not gonna spill all the juice, but imagine if I could just show him the cover image and be like, what kind of 2 words do you think when you see this? If that could be a better way of giving me these very vague kind of tongue-in-cheek titles, that could maybe work better for me, because now I don't think it's not that good at giving these like feature, cover story
Yeah,
titles
I've
at
used it
all.
more as a tool or a help or a guy or like a helper, not to produce finalized text or finalized copy or finalize something,
Yeah.
but to draft things, to summarize
Yeah, exactly.
things,
Yeah.
draft headlines or draft questions for interviews, and that sort of thing is super good. Roland, how about you? You just mentioned it's hard to keep up with the tools and how to use them, and now you're just explaining that it's going to be included in the biggest enterprise tool there is on the face of the earth. I think Microsoft is the biggest, or at least one of the
Yeah.
biggest. It could be a game changer. So how are you using it today?
I think in the same way, kind of as an assistant or a
Mm.
sparring partner, or kind of bounce ideas, or if I'm a bit tired and I just kind of process text and I think that is how I use it so far. And of course, I played around with kind of the art tools and stuff for fun,
Yeah.
right? But I think this is also why I mentioned the AI Copilot of Microsoft 365, because I mean, in my professional life, I advise global corporations on digital transformation. And one of the elements of large scale digital transformation is change management. And how can you get the workforce? If you have a company with 100,000 employees, how can you get the workforce to truly transform and change and adopt change and thrive through change? And there's always been this kind of threshold to get through with that. It's change management is hard, okay? While here I actually see that you in the way it will be embedded into everyday life, into the everyday tools that hundreds of millions of people are using. That is going to have a huge effect on also the mindset of people when it comes to digitalization. So I think when we looked at during the pandemic, there were a lot of kind of memes or comments that said that in 5 months the world changed faster than in the last 50 years or whatever,
Yeah.
when it
Yeah,
comes
yeah.
to digital transformation. And I think we see the same thing here. So literally in 5 days we see bigger change than in the last 5 years. So I think ChatGPT-4 and other tools will have a huge impact.
I think
And
it should be
yeah,
noted before we move on that ChatGPT-4 is actually what is then powering the Microsoft tools, right? Because Microsoft
yeah.
is a investor, co-owner, or a financier somehow of OpenAI. So they I think as a way to kind of in the AI arms race keep up with Google, they put in a huge amount of investment, billions of dollars into this.
Yeah, and one really, really critical element for this to really be a how do you say, a exponential tipping point kind of bonanza is that um, security. So, for example, it is not recommended to use OpenAI's platform for bouncing confidential material, because it's an open platform, right? So,
Right.
but when you embed it into the Microsoft 365 platform, which has very high security standards, then suddenly you can actually sit and bounce a lot of confidential material back and forth and get ideas and use for productivity, etc. So that is going to be a game changer.
Speaking of that, and speaking of issue 4, we actually do have an interview with a Swedish entrepreneur, Joel Hellermark of Sana Labs, in the upcoming issue. He is doing similar work with his AI tool, and one of his sort of arguments or pitches to the companies he's working with is exactly what you're talking about right now, the safety. So having an AI tool placed up on top of a company's information, a company's data, proprietary material, that sort of thing, and it's going to be interesting to see how they are tackling this new development from both Microsoft and Google is also announcing similar tools right inside their Google suite.
But you know what? I think, as I mentioned in our discussion before we kind of started to record, was that personally, I work with tech, digital transformation, business transformation. I think I'm
Right.
on top of things, but I actually start to feel for the first time in my life and career a bit of anxiety around tech, in the sense that it is not natural for me to embed this into my everyday life. And as I mentioned also, I don't really have the time to truly deep dive into it, because I'm so busy every day. I work 10 hours a day, and then I have to take care of family and stuff. And, I'm not going to sit at 11 in the evening and learn, how to create prompts. So I think this is where, I reach a point in life where I'm like, okay, interesting. There's going to be this kind of generational shift, where you have my kids age 10 and 12. For them this is going to be natural. Erik, you're okay, but you're also getting a bit old, even if you're in your 20s. I think that the generation growing up now with these tools that are, let's say, pre-teens, teens, when they enter the work market, oh my fucking god, that is going to create this huge shift in expectations on productivity. So I actually
Yeah.
believe in a dystopian way, that we will become more and more like robots. And if you don't become like a robot in terms of productivity, you're out. You have no place on the work market. And I'm talking about white collar revolution here. This is the game changer. We've been able to hide the white collar workers, say, oh, we will not be robotized. Well, here you go. This is it.
I think that's
Well,
really interesting how you said the productivity and what maybe an employer would demand. They could say like, "Can you come back with this task?" And someone, maybe your kids, they've learned ChatGPT or whatever. They could come back in an hour, while maybe us three, you would say like, "Yeah, I can get you back on Wednesday or whatever," and they won't accept that. I
Exactly.
don't think. I don't think they will be like, "Why would I hire you?" That's interesting.
I feel like we need to bring Roland a hug and a blanket here on this Friday morning.
Well, my third observation actually is on the positive side here.
Okay,
So,
great. Let's get into it before we
yeah, so
invite you.
Reid Hoffman, so the founder of LinkedIn, he actually got access to ChatGPT-4 last summer. Hey guys, this is again interesting. So he got access last summer. So the fifth version will probably come soon, right? So, anyways, he wrote a book entirely using ChatGPT-4. You can find it online. We'll put it in the show notes. But he wrote a book basically only using ChatGPT-4, and it's a pretty good book. It's a factual book, and it's not fiction. But I think that's really where it's amazing, because you can really, in a structured, fast way, process a lot of information and then also exponentially get output that would take years and years. But with tools like this, it can take months or maybe even weeks or maybe even days or hours to produce amazing content. So in that regards, I mean, of course, it's fantastic. So
But
I'm
have you
not
read it?
negative.
Have you like read it or heard?
I
what people
started
said
to read
about
it.
the
I
language,
downloaded the
or-
PDF. It is what it is. I mean, I will let the readers do their own judgment. But if you look at it as a book of a factual book, it's pretty good. And Reid Hoffman obviously is a thought leader since he founded LinkedIn, and he's widely investing in the tech space, and he knows his shit. So yeah.
I just wanted to add to that. I think, like you said, white collar workers. I'm not sure what that term exactly means. I guess I am one, a creative one, in a way.
If you're
But
sitting in front of a computer typing, you're a white collar worker.
okay, then I am literally
Yeah.
at my fingertips. But I thought it was interesting with ChatGPT-4 and what you said now. I think, like, when I see all these tweets, people are talking about, oh, it's so funny, look at the jokes it's writing. I think it feels kind of flat, and it feels like a robot still. People are losing their minds over how brilliant it is. But you can show it a picture and you can ask it, what's so funny about this picture? And it will give you quite a good description and be like, oh, it's funny because of this and this and this. But I don't know, it can't really, from what I've seen at least, it can't come up with like original, comparisons or look at popular culture from the day before and write something funny about that. If I asked ChatGPT before to be like, hey, what was funny about the Oscars last week? I don't think it can do that on the spot like that, which I think human mind still can. And
But
it
you're
reminds
onto
me-
something, Erik. I mean, again, what is the USP of humanity? Still, at least for a couple more months, it's creativity, right? And I would say, I mean, creativity. We're a social species, right? And we have humor. So dogs don't have humor, but they are social. Etc.
We're also curators of information and phenomenon. So that could be part of it. I think let's do this. Let's give ourselves some homework and let's get back in a couple of weeks with a prompt episode. Let's do a special on AI prompts and see what's the best prompts to help us with creativity and curation and humor. And let that be the follow-up to this, because we are now inviting our guest Julia Krantz into the episode and into the discussion. All right, we are now joined by Julia Krantz, creative director that runs the site Magic Fabric. Julia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
So we've been spending the last 15, 20 minutes or so talking about GPT-4 and all the developments, and I'd love to hear your take on that. But to begin with, just give the listeners a short background on you and what you do.
Right. So I'm originally not from the tech industry at all. My background is in fashion and art. So I started out as an artist. And then when I graduated, this is now over 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, and I didn't really feel like I fit into the fashion industry, but I didn't either want to continue working as an artist. So I wasn't really sure what I would fit in. And then I was looking a lot on how the game industry were working. And then I felt a lot like affinity with how they worked with character design and the work that I had been doing. So I was very jealous of them and what they were doing. And they, of course, didn't feel like they were working with anything fashion related. And also things back then very, very different than what it looks today. Even if the core sort of game industry is still very conservative and still what it was. And that's where at that time I started Magic Fabric as a platform, as a blog. And I started interviewing people all over the world that worked in character design. So that's where I started out, and then it's grown into something bigger and wider, and I've started to include a lot more technology than just character design and sort of 3D in it.
Yeah, it's a wonderful site. I'm a huge fan, and I think I discovered it on social, because you really curate some of the most awesome visuals when it comes to specifically digital fashion and like digital textiles and the draping materials and that sort of thing. But can you talk at all about how it's curated stuff from all around the world, right? But is it also your own stuff that you put on there?
Occasionally I do. I mean, I do play around with generative AI a lot and through our experiments there, but mostly it's other people. And I'm also not a 3D artist, just want to point that out. So most of it is other people.
So we have just spent 20 minutes talking about GPT-4, and we've had several episodes on sort of generative AI. Can you give me your take on where we are right now in this space? Is this really a game changer? Is it changing everything, or is it kind of another hype cycle of last year was all about metaverse, now it's all about AI? What's your personal take on it? And we'll take the conversation from there.
I would say definitely not a hype thing, and I'm not sure the metaverse was even a hype thing. I mean, it was a hype then, and then it's evolving. But this is clearly but I mean, clearly this is already providing great value to people, and I feel like 50% excitement and joy and 50% sort of fear and worry what this is going to do. For example, for the job market, and are we going to be fast enough to adjust the legal systems, the sort of ethical aspects of this, and create the frameworks needed for this to actually work out for us and for the greater good. So it's like 50-50 for me. I use this a lot. Like I obviously are throwing out things like these myself to learn and how to work with this. But we are living in interesting times for sure. So yeah, definitely not hype.
I just wanted to ask, we've been talking about this podcast about fashion, how these young fashion designers can use AI to create whole looks and whole collections. We've talked about AI design.png. I don't know if you know about him or her, Elmo Mistein from Belgium. One of my favorite and our favorite Instagrams. Is out of all the people that you curate and put on, how much of them do you know are completely AI generated, like the whole looks and the fabrics and the clothes? Is that something you look for?
Yeah, I think people are quite open about. I mean, before a few months ago, it felt more like people were trying to hide it, or so. Now that it's so accessible and people are more openly using it, I think it's more about who's using it in the most interesting way. And I think the best examples that I've seen is when people are actually combining the AI tools and the capacity of a generative AI together with 3D and sort of makes it next level. Because we don't have the tools that are accessible aren't sophisticated enough to create a really interesting 3D experience yet. I mean, we have a lot of companies and uprunners there as well with Luma AI and KDM and all these types of softwares that actually automatically generates 3D models for you. But I mean, they aren't sophisticated enough yet to be used at the same sort of scale that Midjourney is, for example.
Yeah.
So interesting things coming up there as well.
I want to pick up on the fear part, and I want to bring you in, Roland, because we talked about this just before you came on the show here. You said 50% fear, Roland. Can you describe what you felt around GPT-4 and the AI as an assistant in the workplace?
Well, I mean, to make a long story short here, Julia, I also feel a bit of fear, and it's mainly due to my own limitations in time at the moment. That I'm an executive with a lot of busyness. I sit in endless meetings and I work a lot. I have a family. I'm a father. I have interests outside of work. At the end of the day, it's like, when will I have time to truly understand how to best create the smartest prompts? Well, very limited amount of time. So, in that way, I feel fear. But then on the other hand, what we also discussed was now with Microsoft 365 announcing that they will embed the AI tools in everything and automate a lot of the processes, creating PowerPoints or creating meeting notes or whatever. I mean, then I feel much more positive, because then I see that it will be a kind of embedded into day-to-day life for hundreds and hundreds of millions of people in the workforce. But at the end of the day, I think, and that was one of the conclusions earlier in our conversation, that, and you touched upon this as well, if you're not fast enough, you might be actually obsolete. If you think about it from a productivity point of view. So, I think we kind of ended up saying that, well, what's the USP of humanity at the moment? Well, creativity or humor, or that we are social beings and things like that. But yeah, it's a two-edged sword. It's a lot of fear, but also a lot of excitement.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, now we're talking about it from, if we're diving into the vertical of fashion or digital entertainment, then I mean, you can see there's an endless number of opportunities there. But if you sort of raise and go one level up and talk about it with the hat of just being a citizen and a human being, there's a lot to worry about. And like, we should definitely not sort of rely on or put our trust in commercial tech companies when it comes to where the world is going and how we're going to use this. So it's problematic. And I think everyone has a responsibility. If I, as a publisher, put this on my website, I have a responsibility for how it behaves, for example.
I have a question about that, because you have this kind of Oracle chat on magicfabricblog.com, where you can ask questions. So what is it powered by, and what's the purpose, and why should I use that instead of OpenAI's platform, or
So it's an experiment that sort of, with the platform, I'm always trying out new things and to sort of try and see what people want to see and what they want to do, and what is the future of publishing and what is the future of content. And we're seeing sort of more and more people have less and less time to read and interest in reading long form text, for example. And like, what if you can make it more engaging? What if you can actually interact with the content in a way? So that was sort of the first idea that I had, and like, why not use AI to do this? And a lot of people are like emailing me and asking like, can you come and talk about the future of retail? Can you talk about the future of fashion? And then I was like, what if I have an AI to answer those questions? Because they're always the same questions and I can't answer them. No one can answer what the future of fashion is. So there I was like, okay, I'll make an oracle to do this for me to see what people ask. So, and then I was looking into what can I use to do this, and there's a lot of course, a lot of hype around OpenAI, and then there are other companies working with these technologies based on the same model or a combination of models or other models. And with this, I worked with an American AI company called InWorld, and they are targeting the game industry and working with NPCs. And they have more of an approach where you build a personality, or you can, from a dashboard, actually tweak the personality of the character and steer what it does and says and trigger actions. And then I was also sort of thinking, okay, so what's the limitation of ChatGPT if I would be using that? And it never talks about anything after 2021. So what if we would flip that and say it never talks about what happens before 2021 and only talks about the future?
That's nice. I like that.
So that's what we ended up with, and we softly rolled that out this week. And it's more like, I'm throwing it out, see if people like it. If they don't like it, I'm gonna have to redo it, make another character, see if they like that better. It's like an iterative process.
Yeah, and I understand it's quite easy to create these characters within World. That it's quite seamless. You have a different kind of emotional sets and things like that, and then you can kind of experiment with different characters, right?
Yeah, and I'm so far very impressed with what they're doing, and also sort of from the ethical aspects that we just mentioned, just the monitoring the data. I never see, I just see anonymous data. I cannot see who writes what. I don't see any IPs or anything, but just I have to monitor that people are not sharing personal details and they're getting good responses, and that they're not sort of doing something that I feel is sort of shady or harms people. But it's easy to see when you speak of sort of the ethical aspects. It's easy to see how quickly it sort of moves into those areas, like how quickly people are starting to ask for financial advice. They're sharing things about their sort of mental health, what's going to happen to them in the future. And so far, I think InWorld's done a great job on that. They've managed to sort of, with empathy, steer those conversations, and they've also managed to steer away from trigger words, etc., in a nice way. But if I see that that's not what it's doing, it's my responsibility to shut it down. And that's the mindset I think all companies need to have when using these kinds of tools. And I think OpenAI even themselves says that they're worried about, like, they've released the API, it's open for people to use, but they're worried about what it's going to be used for. So it's like, for me, it's paradoxical. So we're releasing this, but at the same time, we're worried that it's going to be used the wrong way. And it's like, so why did you do it?
You mentioned you are frequently you come on as a speaker to different conferences and bigger corporations. I'm curious, what are some of the most common questions you get from the industry right now? It's been a lot from the fashion industry, of course, but can you see some commonalities in terms of worries or questions or curiosities from the general industry?
Yeah, I think in general, people want to know what's ahead, and they want to know what's the future of things, because they want to know where they should be going. And in the end, it's, I mean, with these conferences and stuff, it's people, they're gathering people that are also influenced by each other. So you're building a narrative that's sort of self-empowering. And in the end, that also then, if enough players with a certain weight decide on something, that's also what's going to happen. So it does have an effect, but you do need to sort of also think for yourself and make your own analysis. And with ChatGPT, it's just like this mass psychosis. Sometimes you go into LinkedIn and there's like 30 people writing bullet lists on what ChatGPT could revolutionize or disrupt in the future.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's even maybe the most interesting question that we could ask right now. I would rather have people asking, like, what do you want to build? Like, what do you want to do with this? Where do you think this is heading? And get creative with it, instead of building their brand presence on LinkedIn. Now I sounded a bit critical, but it's sort of how I see it.
No, that's fine. Erik, did you have a question?
No, I was just really wondering about Emmy that is on your website. I thought it was interesting because I asked it, what are some of the best virtual fashion designers right now? And gave me an answer straight away. And it said, like, I kind of feel like this answer is kind of pulled off Scandinavian Mind. Like, I feel like I've been writing about these things in various articles for a while. And then I kind of said, like, okay, but can you list any more up and coming ones? And it said, like, some of the ones I never heard of. Do you, like, how does it find these ones? Do you know, like, are you part of this in any way? And I'm just asking because I don't understand it, you know. And I just want to say that up and coming ones, let's see what they were. They were Anouk Wieprecht, Amber Yao Slouten, that we know about, and Pia Hinse. What can you say about them? Are they up and coming? Did they get it right?
I think Anouk Wieprecht, I remember. I think she made a lot of things in, like, wearable technology 10 years ago. I think I've seen, but sometimes it just makes up stuff as well. So you should always trust what you have to do research. But most of it is coming from InWorld, and so you would only, like, you could ask them, like, how this exactly works. But yes, I do have a part in it because I can add an additional knowledge base. So if there's something specific that I want the character to know of, for example, who I am or what Magic Fabric is, I can add that. Somehow sometimes, I guess that's some of the downsides I see with the product, is that it sometimes randomly puts that in. Like, it doesn't it seems to override some of the original context. So for example, if I write something about a Swiss artist, and then Switzerland comes up in a conversation, it could just randomly put in this person without having anything to do with the conversation. So it's still like a bit like janky sometimes. But yes, you can add additional information. I have not pulled your article from Scandinavian Mind, but I could have.
let's add Scandinavian Mind into it. I would love to see that.
No, but actually, you're onto something, because what I want to do with this is like I want to train the AI with everything that's on the website, so that you can actually have answers coming from the chatbot that are based on the people that I've interviewed on the site. That would be really
exactly.
cool. Yeah.
I want to end the conversation here. I want to actually circle back to what we talked about in the beginning, which is we mentioned the metaverse. And I mean, to your point a little bit, from a media perspective, some of these discussions become very kind of binary. It becomes now everyone's talking about the metaverse, and all of a sudden now no one's talking about the metaverse. The metaverse is dead. Now everyone's talking about AI. AI is the shit. Every company needs to be talking about it, and there is actually some merit to that. And you see, Facebook just recently kind of downplayed their metaverse play. I think there's a stock play to do that, because now and they're upplaying kind of the AI thing. But going back to the metaverse, it was something. I mean, we've talked extensively about it in this podcast, and the opportunities for digital fashion and digital worlds in which people can experience fashion and so forth. So let's to bring it a little bit more nuanced, and I know you've been in this space yourself, both professionally and covering it on Magic Fabric. Where do you see it going? Are we in a kind of metaverse winter from a sort of PR perspective right now? The way I see it is, it seems like a lot of things are happening beneath the surface, or at least behind the headlines. I want to hear your take on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's evolving. So, I mean, it's almost like sort of, it's not directly comparable, but in a way, I remember when I started working at Volumental 10 years ago, and people were talking about 3D printing, and the expectations were so immensely high on, and media was writing about everyone owning their own 3D printer and printing their own garments and shoes at home. And I mean, clearly that was not where the disruption was happening. It was on a sort of industrial basis. So it was all about like the wrong expectations. And I think we've had the wrong expectations here as well. And then we've had a race between the tech companies, and then the hardware and the software could not live up to those expectations. But I think if we talk about the brands that hopped on this train, like the fashion brands and other types of businesses, I think they definitely learned something. It's just that those requests, I can only go to myself and see the requests that I'm getting now compared to like 6 months ago. And 6 months ago, it was more about, or in the summer, it was more about, we want to launch our own NFT collection. We want to make skins for that. And now it's more like, we want to make a virtual avatar or a character for our brand, because we understand the importance of having a virtual presence, or being able to have a virtual ambassador that represents our brand on those types of platforms. So it's in a way, it's sort of detached then from the Web3 narrative. It's not important for them then if this is on chain or off chain. So I guess that's where a lot of companies are moving. And I also see many of the digital fashion studios that started out last year are now also trying out making physical products.
Right.
So it's like they are like doing the phygital thing, because that's where they need to go now. So those are two, I think, bigger movements that we've seen. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. We'll see what happens. Julia, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insights. If you want to recommend just 2 or 3 things, could be obviously Magic Fabric and your new chatbot, but things you've seen right now that you're excited about, what would that be?
I mean, everyone who's in the creative space should obviously try out all the image generators and ChatGPT and similar things. If you're not into it, that's totally fine. But it's good to at least understand the capacity of it. It's sometimes, for me, it's sometimes a bit like provoking, even outside of, when we're talking outside of creatives and designers, but it's provoking for me to hear people be so overconfident in like, this is not concerning my profession. I'm not going to be replaced. This is not sort of the way it's portrayed, and I'm not worried. This is just going to be a tool for me.
Right.
And I wouldn't be so sure, like at the speed that it's moving now. And I don't think it's not necessarily a bad thing to be obsolete. Like we can like spend our time doing more fun things, and that's like where we lack a political vision about this. I think, what are we going to do with this moving forward, and how are we going to spend those resources that we're now sort of unlocking with automation? So that's what I want to see.
It's not a bad thing to become obsolete. Let's end it there with Julia Krantz, creative director and founder of the Magic Fabric blog. We're huge fans. Thanks for all your great work. Keep it up, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
All right, this has been a packed and mind-blowing episode, and thank you, Julia, for coming on the show. I want to end with plugging our good friend Roland. You bailed from Scandinavian Mind with your art podcast, renamed it to Art Bystander, which everyone knows has been your Instagram handle for the past year or so. Roland, I want to give you a chance to plug your new podcast, The Art Bystander, and where people can find it.
So there's two sides of the coin. If I bailed or if I got thrown out of the platform, let's discuss that. But in any case, thanks for the plugging opportunity. The Art Bystander, you can find it on all streaming platforms or podcast platforms. And theartbystander.com. But basically, I'm interviewing really the moneymakers, the curators, the gallerists, all the people that are working in the art industry to discuss, what's the current state of art, but also what's the future state of art. So yeah, if you're into that space, give it a listen.
If you're into that space, if you're into Roland, listen to the Art Bystander, and obviously don't forget to sign up to our newsletter. Visit scandinavianmind.com/newsletter not to miss out on any of the news regarding our upcoming issue, which is launched in about a month, end of April. Until next week, guys. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.